and then from New Zealand to Tonga, a bit of time in Tonga, and then we left Tonga and we went to Fiji. And but we sort of felt by that stage you probably would have had enough. And it's I think from it's sort of being asked to do this presentation reminded me of when I was a kid and my grandfather retired and he went to England for a couple of years and he came back and he sat us all down and we watched a slideshow one night, and it was all of his 2 years in Europe and traveling around and everything else. And I thought, maybe in half an hour Andrew can wave and we might have had enough. So we'll see how it is. But I guess from Lisa's and my point of view, we probably started this journey. Yes, please. Yeah, hang on a second. I mean, you know, what am I supposed to be having? Red.
Where was it? Did you
in that one.
For those of you just joined us, Brian and Lisa are true to form sitting on a boat.
Perfect.
This is really testing the high tech here.
And we absolutely had the most brilliant afternoon because we had the first sundowners on our yacht for months and months and months. It was so good.
So I suppose I was going to spend a second and say the first I suppose trip that Lisa and I did really was a long time ago. I used to be a part owner in a VAR 1020. We raced to Tasmania a couple of times, and she came down, and we had a week cruising on the Tamar. And in a VAR 1020, you don't have hot water, you don't have any water pressure, you do all of those sort of things. So we sort of really liked sailing. We really liked the idea of cruising, but we didn't like, or Lisa didn't like, a bloke's yacht.
There wasn't quite as much comfort as I needed.
Yeah, so we've gradually progressed, and we went through, and after that, we got out of that. We had a Beneteau 423, and we did a bit of cruising up and down the Australian coast and stuff with that. And we changed to this, which is a 50-foot 50-foot Beneteau, and we've had that since 2015, I think.
Yep.
And we needed to do a reasonable amount of preparation to have the boat ready to go across the Tasman to New Zealand, and from New Zealand to go up to Tonga and around the Pacific. So we sort of thought we'd spend a couple of minutes for people whom, you know, maybe would like to do that sort of offshore cruising and say what we did to sort of get the boat right. We did the trip with a New Zealand organisation called Island Cruising Association, which is based in the Bay of Islands, and they organise rallies around the Pacific every couple of years. And I've participated on a couple of bits and pieces of those, sailed from New Caledonia back probably 10 or 15 years ago to New Zealand a couple of times. Lisa and I have sailed from Vanuatu up to, what was the islands? Santo, which is just north of Vanuatu. So we felt if you go there's an awful lot of yachts that go through the Pacific, a lot from the US and Europe, and they go through the Pacific, through the islands, and they sail down to New Zealand when the cyclone season is approaching in the islands. And I think our insurances expired if we weren't out of the islands by the 10th of October.
No, November, 1st of November.
Oh, okay, 1st of November. So you've got to be out of the islands by the 1st of November, or your insurance is waived. So, and the other benefit in going from New Zealand is you sail up to Tonga, so you're heading north, and the winds are predominantly east. So when you're getting to Tonga, then to travel down to Fiji and on to Vanuatu and New Caledonia and back to Australia, if the winds are predominantly west-east, you're traveling downhill. So just makes it easier for sailing as long as the weather conditions are right. So I suppose that's a bit of background in that respect. The things that we did for the boat. Hang
on a second. So to be able to do the Island Cruising Association and to be able to go around the South Pacific Islands, we needed to get the boat from Melbourne to the Bay of Islands in New Zealand.
Oh, and we had to bring it up to spec.
Ah, absolutely, we did, and we had a lot to do. So we had Marissa, who's watching tonight, come on board as our safety officer to get the boat up to almost cat. What was it?
Cat 1.
Cat 1. Yeah, and it was that was quite a lot of work.
Was that your requirement or the requirement of the association you're going to sail with?
It wasn't a requirement of the association,
Yeah, yes,
but
was.
it's a requirement of New Zealand.
Yes, New Zealand needed it. Yeah.
If a yacht sails into New Zealand and wants to sail out of New Zealand, it has to be certified Cat 1.
No, but we didn't actually have to have it certified.
We had to sign off.
So we had to say that we had it to that standard, but we didn't have to have someone actually certify it. And that's because we were from Australia. But anyone from New Zealand who was leaving, they had to actually have the certification. But we just felt we weren't going to go unless we had everything exactly as it was anyway. So
yeah, sure. Thank you.
I wasn't going to go.
We weren't going to go unless Lisa felt safe. That's probably the real answer to it. But she didn't go to New Zealand anyway, so she didn't do that part. But very quickly. I mean, I suppose in terms of we had all of the safety gear generally on the boat, all of those requirements. We had to put on an Iridium Go, which is like an Iridium phone, but it's not. It's not really a sat phone. It's for communication, so you can hook up faxes and you can get all your weather information. You can talk on it and stuff like that. So that's the requirement of the rally in New Zealand. We tried to do a rally around Tasmania last year, but one of us had a bit of a health problem, and their requirement was we have an HF radio. So we didn't need the HF radio to go around the Pacific, but we didn't need the Iridium Go. So the other things in terms of the boat that we did, we put on a water maker because we needed, because everybody said you'll run out of water and you need to do that.
So all these things were requirement. We actually flew over to New Zealand in November before we went in the following April. And it was a briefing of the things that you'll need to do to get your boat ready to go. Now, they were all over there, so they were fine, but we had to do it all in Australia before we went. So it was quite a lot of preparation.
Yep, and we poked on well, our worry really was fuel, because we have 230 litres of fuel on the boat. And I felt that if we needed to motor half the way to New Zealand, then we probably wouldn't have enough fuel to get there. So, and ultimately, that became an issue for us for other reasons. But I think if we sort of start, and if Andrew can flick up the first slide that we had, that's really, when till you get it.
That's the one.
That's really, that's
It is our trip.
That's the trip to New Zealand from Melbourne, and we left on the 11th of March in 17, and that was the date that I wanted to leave. So, I sort of thought, well, we looked at the weather coming over from Perth, it looked okay. We thought we would be able to go. We were in communication with the people that were organising the rally in New Zealand, and they thought it was all right. They had other people coming from Sydney who'd been waiting 3 weeks, and they weren't able to. We headed off, and I think before you look at the next slide, you'll see, if you look at Melbourne down to Wilson's Prom, and then heading due east towards the top of New Zealand, we came out of Melbourne in pretty nice conditions, motoring and motor sailing. And then we motored across to the east, because that's what I wanted to do. I felt that was the direct route, and I wanted to be there as quick as we could. And we were communicating with New Zealand, and they were saying, head south and you'll get the winds. So when you look at the that route, then you'll see that that's where we turned south, and then we curled around and curled back up to the top of New Zealand, and we came in. And that was really because we have 230 litres on the boat and we have 240 on the side, don't we? So, okay. So Andrew, if you go to the next, that's us the morning that we're heading off to New Zealand. That's the boat, and you can see we put fender boards onto the side of the boat, and then we attach the fuel to it. We're attaching the fuel at that time. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we've got 240 litres of extra diesel tied to the side of the boat, and I think we had 1 20-litre container of fuel for the outboard. So that was us. We poked one of the things we did really is we put the davits on the back of the boat. We were told that we needed to get rid of the soft bottom dinghy and get a hard bottom, which we actually had made in New Zealand, and you'll see that in a slide in a minute. We put the photovoltaic panels onto the roof for obvious reasons. And one of the things that we were conscious all the way really was our power usage on Autohelm. We were getting through a fair amount of power. We have a generator on the boat, so we probably had to run that a couple of times a day. We were conscious of that. So probably that's all you'll see from that slide. If you flick over, do you want me to tell you, Andrew, or do you want me to say something? Or okay, that's the team. So Ray, a number of you will know Ray McKenzie from Mornington, and Pete
Grass.
and Andrew Waters, who's a sailing friend of mine that I've done a number of trips with, who probably makes me feel very, very good on a lot of occasions. So that's the team.
They look happy at the start, don't they?
Yeah, that's the team as we left Melbourne. So the next shot. Okay.
Yeah. So then you're on your way.
Oh God. Okay.
This is a movie.
Yeah. Well.
Yeah. Thursday the 16th. View from inside the Dodger. Outside, seas are about 2 meters. Blowing, I'd imagine 20, 25 knots. So just to turn around, Andrew on the hill. We're doing hour and a half shifts.
Okay.
So that's probably, they are the conditions that we had on the way over. We we had everything really from nothing up to about 40 knots. So the next slide is really just showing where we are. Now, I don't know if everybody's familiar, but that's a predict wind. So it's a photograph of the predict wind course, us halfway across the Tasman. Predict wind is giving us 4 course options, and it's giving us the time that it will take to get us to the top of New Zealand. So I don't know if people are familiar with that, but if anybody wants to ask about it later on. It's a technology that's really handy and can be really good. So in terms of that sail across, we had a couple of things. The Windex packed up. We had a couple of issues with the plotter. Probably one of the most exciting was our furler sheet broke when we were in 30 to 40 knots on the way over at about 2 o'clock in the morning with one person up on watch, and the whole heady came out, which was disappointing. But other than that, we had a pretty good run. That's really just a shot of in nice sailing conditions and everybody eating out in the cockpit. Don't know, the next one is
Another movie.
Oh, another movie, Andrew. Is that Presh? Is that just about at New Zealand?
No, it's just another.
Yeah.
Showing the conditions.
Okay, so just really, just showing nice conditions cruising across the Pacific. Really, there's
Not Pacific.
where's the Pacific?
It's the Pacific. Sorry.
Across the so for those, I don't know if you can see, you might have just seen. We had a tender tied onto the bow onto the coach house, and we've got an outboard tied onto the back of the boat. We were delivering both of those to New Zealand. That's just the. Oh, where are you, Andrew? Okay, that's fine. Well, yep. Okay, well that's where we are on the plotter. So there's nothing.
Oh,
yeah,
8.8 knots.
Oh yeah, ticking along. So that's all right. We're probably cruising. Generally, we generally plan on cruising at about 6.5 knots, and I think on the trip over we might have got up to 10 or something, a bit over that. So that's all right. That gives you an idea from that perspective. Looking at the next slide you've got, I think it's Pete.
Breakfast.
Oh, breakfast on some 11. Okay, nothing flash. Next one, you can.
Dinner's not bad though.
Yeah.
Next one, that's dinner on Summer Loving when the conditions are pretty flat and we were having a pretty smooth run. So for those people that worry about cruising and crossing oceans, I reckon that would make everybody feel pretty comfortable. So, okay, that's that one. The next is really as we are approaching the top. So if you look at that slide for a second, we've just had to cross over the top, Cape Reinga at the top of New Zealand, and then run down the east coast to, that's our destination that I've put in Predict Wind, which is the Bay of Islands. So that's really giving us the route from where we are at that point around to Opua and the Bay of Islands. Now, it's not showing on that screen, but based on the speed that we were doing at that particular time, it would give us an ETA into the Bay of Islands. So that gives you an idea of where we were, what it was like at that particular point in time. If you go to the next, Andrew, what have I got?
That's another video.
Another video. Oh.
Oh, Lisa, you're getting clever with the video.
Okay. The sounds. No, I know. It's just,
watching it for about an hour now. So we're expecting to go round the east.
okay, well, that's really what I said. That's
At 1 o'clock in the morning.
Can people hear that or not?
Can everybody hear that, Andrew? Can you guys hear it or not?
I can hear it, but I've got it.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, well, maybe people can't, but that was really the first moment that we could see the coast of New Zealand. So we would have been traveling for 10 days at that particular time. So we're probably pretty happy that we could see it. And then we were expecting to be in the Bay of Islands the following day. So that's just a bit of a video probably of everybody being a little bit enthusiastic because we can see it.
Next one, yep.
Yeah, good. That's
Play that
going
one.
around Cape Reinga at the top of New Zealand. No, it's not. That one's going down towards
That's
Opua.
another video, isn't it, Andrew?
So,
Thank
Is
you.
it?
Yeah, that's saying about that.
Approaching Bay of Islands.
With us.
See the point up ahead. Around that point, we'll have on the other side Cape Brett. Cape Brett's the far side of the entrance into Russell and Opal, where we're going. The time is after 8:30 on
you
Wednesday.
see that?
At that point, we'll have on the other
Okay.
side.
Yeah, we don't have that. So you can probably,
Cape Brett's
well,
the far side.
before you flick to the next one, Andrew, okay, so that's just the approach into Opua and the Bay of Islands. And there was a bit of footage in there just showing the entrance into the Bay of Islands, and there were a couple of game fishing boats, stuff like that. But
Cuts out.
if you're not getting that, then the next one in actual fact is us just coming into Opua, and this is where you arrive in New Zealand. So all of the international yachts traveling through the Pacific, coming down to New Zealand, most of them end up in Opua. And this is the approach to Opua. So we've been sailing for 11 days, and Lisa wasn't prepared to come on the boat, but she was sufficiently excited to welcome us. So this is really just our arriving.
It's another video, Andrew.
It's a video, and it's her welcoming us. If you can see it, I don't know.
No, you're not
Fresh.
can't see him
I
for some
can't get
reason.
in there, sorry.
Okay, well, that's fine, really. So really, that's just us going into Opua. We just went round the corner of the end of the buildings there, and we checked into the customs. And we actually left Pete and I think Ray did Ray stay in New Zealand? No, Ray flew back to Australia. We flew back to Australia, and Pete and Andrew, their wives and partners flew over, and they stayed on the boat for a week or two and had a look around the Bay of Islands and that area.
No, Ray and his wife.
Was it Ray?
Yeah,
Oh,
Pete
Pete flew
home,
back.
yeah.
Yeah, okay, fine. And we flew back for work, and then we flew back to New Zealand, and then we flew back to New Zealand to do the next leg up to Tonga. And I think Andrew should have that on the
next lot of slides.
Next lot of slides or the next lot of pics. Now,
Bear with me.
yeah, that's all right. That's fine. Hopefully they're there. I mean, it was pretty hard for us to get somebody to put this together. I'm just disappointed about your the couple of videos not going through. But I think probably for those people that have done cruising and done passages and everything else, the thing that happens is it's the weather that dictates all of the issues. We were very fortunate in going to New Zealand and leaving when we wanted to, and we weren't quite so fortunate in leaving New Zealand and going to Tonga. So we came back to Melbourne for a couple of weeks, then flew back to New Zealand to join all the other boats. Now, I started off and said about the Island Cruising Association. There were 30 boats, or 30 odd boats, weren't there?
Yeah.
That did the rally. And there were probably 30 or 40 other international boats that were leaving Opa and the Bay of Islands at the same time as we were leaving, and all waiting for a weather window to head up to Tonga. And
Because there was a cyclone.
I think there were 3 cyclones running through the Pacific Islands when we were all trying to leave New Zealand. So what we really found was that was the first thing that we weren't accustomed to. We spent 2 weeks waiting in Opor for the weather conditions to be right to head up to Tonga. A few of the boats left early and turned around and came back as a consequence of the weather conditions. Some took shelter and just hove to for a few days. And we went on I think we were on the second wave, were we?
Yeah, second wave. Yeah.
We were on the second wave, which wasn't the official, but we had a crew member who had allocated 3 weeks to get to Tonga and had to be back working in Australia. So we either left and went to Tonga or lost a crew member and had to find somebody or go a little bit shorter. So,
Brian, what sort of date was that?
What date?
Yeah, roughly. What month?
You were in May.
We
had to wait till May.
We had to go through until May.
Yep.
And we were supposed to leave sort of mid to late April, and we ended up leaving early May. So.
And I was going to say the boats and the fleet and the people who were doing it. So you had a group of people who were mixed nations that had sailed to New Zealand. Their boats had been refitted and everything else, and they were sailing back up into the Pacific for another winter. And then there were boats that we were sailing with. Some of them we had one Canadian boat, an American boat, a couple of other boats, a few Australian boats, and then a mix of New Zealand boats. Now, and in size, they varied from, I think the smallest was a 36-footer from Sydney with the oldest couple on it. I think Pete was
mid-70s.
Mid-70s. It doesn't seem that old now, actually. And we had a few catamarans, and the size, as I say, the size of the boat, monohulls were about 36 up to 54, and the cats were up to about 45. And the cross section of the people was fantastic. There was very, very good to have people who a mix of talent. So if you had a problem on the boat, there would generally be somebody who was able to help you. If it was electronics, if it was mechanical. One of the boats had a fire middle of the passage between Tonga and Fiji, and there were people around. It was electrical, so they could be helped. that was probably one of the main benefits. The customs people.
So hang on a second. I'm just going to butt in for a second. So you can see on the screen where we went. And that's a lot of. Oh, we can't anymore, but you could. So we went a circuit of the South Pacific, and to do that as a couple was never going to happen from my perspective. But to do it in company meant that I could be brave and I could say, okay, I'm going to do this, because lots of other women do as well. So there were a lot of women who actually didn't do the trip from the Bay of Islands to Tonga, and a lot of them were FIFOs, fly in, fly out wives. So they flew across to Tonga and then they did the cruising. But I actually went on the Tonga bit. But it's something that I would never have done if I didn't do it in company. And you think 36 boats, oh my God, it's going to be awful.
Boats.
But what happens is that you start together, you sail and you get to your point, then you have 4 or 6 weeks of doing whatever you like, and then you all gather together again to go through customs and go on to the next point. So it was a fantastic way of doing it. Anyway, that's all I need to say.
You can see the route that we did up to Tonga and around just on that. So that's the trip, and we'll just take you as far as Tonga. So if you wanted to go to the next one, Andrew, that's the approach to Tonga. So it's really just it's a promotional leaflet, really showing the route from New Zealand up past the Minerva Reef, up into Tongatapu and up to Hapai, and then on to the Lao group of islands, and then across to Fiji. So that's all you need on that. And the next one you can be very quick on.
That's after me. That's after me being downstairs for the first 3 days. I did not go upstairs once because we were in somewhere between 30 and 40 knot winds, and we had seas that were about 5 meters coming at the back of the boat. So every time I put my head out to feed them food, I'd go, and I'd go back downstairs again. And suddenly the sun came out and the seas flattened and I was upstairs.
So day 3 on the way to Tonga, blue sky, flat seas, lovely conditions. We left, we motored out of the Bay of Islands. We had, within 3 hours, we had 2 crew down below seasick. Lisa not wanting to come up, and we were on a time frame. The next one is day 3 and she's actually feeling better. First loaf of bread on the boat, which was pretty successful. So that was the picture. Next one, Andrew, is,
just typical sailing of a night.
Sailing up towards Tonga in nice conditions. I don't need to add any more to that. Same thing. At that time, you can see we're motoring. The main's up. We put that's the dinghy that we bought or had made in New Zealand, and just tied onto the bow rather than on the davits. You can probably go from that to the next. So there we are. Now, I would imagine that we're probably motoring as well. We're in pretty nice conditions. The weather's improved. It's a little bit warmer, and we're heading on our way to Tonga. The next one is probably the beginning of, depends on those people who are into sailing and those people into fishing. I had a brother who I asked if he would like to come with us for part of the trip, if he'd like to come for a month or so. And he said, I think that'd be really good. I just checked with the missus. So he checked and came back a week later and said, yep, I'm on, no problem at all. I've got a leave pass for 6 months. So he actually came for the whole trip, and he is a pretty keen fisherman and is probably the reason that we lived a lot on fish. So this is the next slide will show you what we were trying to bring in at that time. That's about a 60 kg tuna, and about 20 seconds after that we broke the rod, which was incredibly disappointing. That was the second tuna. We're up by Minerva, which is the Minerva Reef 2/3 of the way towards Tonga. And we'd caught one tuna that we hadn't been able to get on, which we think was 70 or 80 kg. And this one was about 60. So that's about 3 meters from the back of the boat, and it's as close as it got. It was disappointing. We came back to Australia and we bought another rod off Sport Phillip. So you can go to the next. We'll run through. That's, you'd say, is there land in the background? So that's, looking over the port side. I think that we're approaching Tonga at that point.
We've just seen land.
Yep, we've just seen land. The next, oh yeah, just nice sailing conditions heading up into the Pacific. Next, oh, we're actually in, that's interesting.
They're a bit out of order, but that's okay.
Come out of, okay, fine. Well, that's the day after we arrived in Tonga. Well, you can see that we're eating or preparing fresh fish, and Elise is excited. That's the largest avocado that she'd ever seen.
So 2 handfuls was 1 avocado. Amazing. Yeah.
So that was that. The next is really a shot of a typical market in Tonga. And the
Lots
next,
of root vegetables.
Yep. Which aren't what you want. Now that's actually, that's the harbour is
Nuku'alofa. That's in Nuku'alofa, where we were supposed to sail right through to the Hapai group, and we couldn't get there. We had to get one of our crew off and flying home. So we went straight to Nuku'alofa, which was the first point in Tonga that you could go into, and we had to clear customs there. This is the harbour there, and you can see on the next slide the shape of the harbour as well. Everyone reverses in.
That's
so
the
harbour.
And
over to the right is actually where we went to. It's a little place called Big Mama's. It was a lovely little place to anchor and stay, but we had to still go into the harbour and
clear customs.
Clear customs, yeah.
So that was typical sort of Pacific location. Not, you know.
Now we've gone up to where we were supposed to meet everyone. This was in the
Hapai group.
Yeah. So this is Olivo.
And this is Summer Loving viewed from the beach. So that's the, you can go to the next one, I think, Andrew.
You can tell we're in the Pacific Islands finally.
Yep.
So when you said typical scene, I thought it was that slide.
Ah, that's
There's the
oh
dinghy.
yeah. Well, that's the dinghy that we bought in New Zealand, which is a hard bottom dinghy. And there's a lot of them, or quite a few of them, on cruising boats around the Pacific. So nothing more you need to see on that.
This one's a movie.
Oh, a movie.
Let's see if it works this time.
Here we are.
Yeah, so this is arriving.
That toward the north of Hapai, Lisa?
Yes, so this is Olivo, and this is where we were supposed to clear customs, and you can see there's a number of yachts there. That's all of our crew, our group, and those who didn't clear with us in Nuku'alofa cleared here. So the customs officials came to us to do the clearance, which was one benefit of being in the group of boats that we were in. There are several places where we didn't have to go to normal customs points, where they actually cleared us as a group of boats together. And this was quite a lovely spot, beautiful beach, beautiful, just a beautiful part of Tonga.
That was the beginning. That's where we caught up with everybody, because when you're traveling across, you're not really in contact with anybody. Sometimes you're able to by radio, but most of the time, I think we probably left New Zealand. We left New Zealand with 3 boats. We probably parted company within about 12 hours.
Yeah. And
we caught up again in Tonga. So whilst you say you're sailing with people, you're not really. As Lisa said, in terms of the benefit of the rally, was that the organisers all arranged with the customs people. So in Tonga, the customs people flew out to where we were, and they cleared all the boats. And in Fiji, it was even more so. They flew out to the Eastern Islands, and so we were able to arrive about 200 200 miles east of Suva, and we were able to clear customs then and then travel around the place.
And that's
So,
when we went down to the
Salanga.
southern Lao.
Yeah.
Because we were so east, we were able to just do a beeline down there, which was fantastic.
so you've done 80% of the trip so far to Tonga, and we can go through the next couple of slides pretty quickly, I think. It's we met Di and Mark, who are from Safety Beach, and have a 45-footer, which is
Mustang Sally.
Mustang
I
Sally,
don't know if you know it.
and they have
We just
sailed.
bumped into them.
They've sailed around the Pacific for a long time. They had their boat in Fiji, and they sailed up to Tonga, and we caught up with them in Tonga. So the next slide, Andrew, was
Just the same beach. Just
same beach, different shot.
next slide
Next
is just
slide.
the typical
Yeah,
restaurant on the beach. And that's the group of us, just enjoying ourselves. The next slide's just the sunset, looking out at the boats again.
Oh yeah. Yep.
You're still in Hawaii or Vavavu?
We're still
Still
half.
Harpai.
Yeah,
Next.
and that's still Hapai as well. Yeah, pretty lovely beaches. Now we're heading into Niafu.
So we're on the approach into Niafu, and it's just
So there's 171 islands in Tonga. So we're not going to show you any of them. What we will do is say you have to go there and cruise. It's a beautiful place. It's so unspoilt still. It's got great weather and temperature. And even if you just hire a boat over there, it's a beautiful place to cruise. Next slide. Again, coming into Niafu.
on the way in.
Yeah, to Port, what's that called? I can't remember. Port.
Is it not Port Narelle? Oh no.
Anyway.
And the next,
Port Morel.
Yeah.
Yeah, Port Morel.
and the next one is just in the port.
In the actual port itself.
So that's sort of, now we've got you to Tonga, and we haven't done what Andrew asked, and how was it to dive into the cave in Tonga, and all of those sort of things. What happened for us, unfortunately, was when we organised to do the trip, part of our planning was we wanted to fly home every 5 or 6 weeks. So we needed to fly home for work, and we were 2 weeks late leaving New Zealand. So we didn't spend quite as much time in Tonga as we would have wished, but it was Lisa's second time in Tonga sailing and my third time. So we
felt we could get away with losing that part of the trip.
So in terms of our slideshow for tonight, that's what we've done. We're happy to answer any questions if anyone would like to.
When are you going back?
As soon as we can.
We were caught just prior to COVID. We were taking the boat.
The jealousy meter.
We actually had the boat all provisioned and everything to head up to New South Wales and Queensland. We had a permit to go out of Victoria. Well, we were in the process of arranging the permit to go into New South Wales just prior to COVID. We were getting that permit, and the health department in New South Wales phoned us on the Monday. If you can be conscious of the border closing on the Tuesday, which may not have been relevant to you guys, but it was to us. And a doctor from New South Wales Health phoned us on the Monday morning and said, when will you be in New South Wales? And we said, we'll be in, he said, will you be in New South Wales by midnight on Wednesday? And we said, yep, not a problem in the world. And he said, oh, that's great. Well, you don't have a worry. I'll send you a permit. And we were leaving that afternoon. So we had the boat fueled up, provisioned, 4 crew and everything else. And I said to him, I thought that the border was closing midnight on Tuesday. And he said, It is too. Will you be in New South Wales by midnight Tuesday? And we said no. So
They said, don't go, don't come.
don't come. So we weren't going into the Pacific. We thought that we would do that. We're now saying we'll go to Tasmania over the summer, and we'll take the boat again north up to the Whitsundays over next winter and go back out into the Pacific the following winter.
Yeah.
So there we are.
Bam.
Hey. I've got a question, if that's okay to jump in. Brian, as far as the passages go, how was the provisioning and the fuel and all those sorts of things? Were your worries and fears anywhere near it, or did you have plenty and things?
I think we were always fairly conservative. The comments or the advice that we had in going through the Pacific Islands was the quality of the fuel is not necessarily good. So I was always trying to maximize what we had so that we weren't caught in locations where we needed to buy fuel and where it wasn't of a sufficient quality. The scary things from my point of view was I did a bit of work in terms of becoming a little bit diesel, having more diesel knowledge, being able to change the oil and do those sort of things. I had two more filters put onto the boat prior to going, so that if we had bad fuel, there was a likelihood that we would be able to, get it out before it buggered up the injectors on the motor, and then I was in crap station. So generally, I think we fueled in Tonga.
I think that the scariest part probably would have been as they left the heads. So Brian was determined he was going to do a bird's eye, like fly a direct line to Bay of Islands. So they went out around Wilson's Prom, and he was going that way. And I think they were beating into winds.
Oh no, it was pretty flat, but no wind. No wind.
Weren't you? But we were using fuel.
Well, what was happening really is I was motoring for 3 days, and I thought, now hang on, we've got 11 days of trip. I'm motoring for 3 days. I'm putting fuel in, and I'm thinking, hang on a tick. 5 days, I'm out of fuel. So time I listened to somebody and actually headed south and got a wind. So after that, we were pretty well right.
And the fuel was fantastic. Like, it was never a problem. We actually covered the fuel tanks once we were in the Pacific with tarps, so that they didn't get too hot. And they worked really well on the sides of the boat. They were all tied on, they never moved, and we were in some quite big seas. So that was good. And provisioning of food, well, I did a good lot of that back here in Australia.
I was worried about that. I saw Brian's glass a second ago. So.
We had a reasonable amount of grog as well, but what we found, I mean, Beneto's a production boat, and it's made really for that sort of cruising. So they're made for chartering, they're made for cruising around the place. And our boat has a fridge and a fridge freezer. Now they call it a freezer, but it's not really a freezer sufficient.
They're an ice box, really.
Yeah, it's not a freezer sufficient to be, in tropical conditions. So we put on a plug-in freezer as well. So we've got
a Waco camping freezer that slid between the two legs of our table, and it still sits here now. We had a 12-volt plug put in.
Yep.
And we have a freezer on board. So.
And I think we had, I don't know how much, a lot of places won't allow you to take meat unless it's certified. So we actually...
All through the Pacific, you are not allowed to take any meat into each country unless it was from New Zealand or from Australia, cryovac and certified by the butcher that it hadn't been opened and signed off.
So we had, I don't know how much.
So we had a freezer full of meat.
We had a freezer full. We were eating fillet steaks when we came back to Australia. We were fine.
And I don't eat meat.
Your audio broke up when you explained
you're
having fillet steaks, so I think most of us are pretty happy to hear it all broken up. We didn't hear you say fillet steaks, so it sounds very... That's fantastically done. I was going to actually ask you a question about with your foodstuffs, in particular fruit and things, if you're taking fruit and veggies for exactly the same reason. I suspect it's probably the same answer.
There's There's a really good, so obviously we stocked as much fresh fruit and veg as we could from the Bay of Islands, but the Bay of Islands is actually a very small little country town, if you like, so not a great big place
Well,
where you're going to get
Opua
lots
was-
of, where we were, you know, Opua was quite small. I found, and once again from the knowledge of the people who've been sailing, there are called, I think they're called green crisp bags. And they are bags that you actually dry out. You make sure you paper towel all of your vegetables and fruits, and you put them in these green bags, and they last nearly a month in the fridge. And they're amazing, and they're just plastic bags. So those were good. And then the other thing, of course, in the islands, you actually have to wash everything that you buy. So, but provisioning from fruit and vegetables, you could get heaps and heaps of stuff once you were there. It was more just your basic essentials, your canned things, your spices and herbs, your cheeses and dips and all
We
anything that your luxuries from home, you couldn't get those, so you bought as many of them as you could with you.
we threw away a lot of canned food when we came home.
Yeah, because I wasn't going to eat canned peas and canned beans if I didn't need to. Yeah.
Anyone else got any questions?
Guys, just with your navigation, did you take paper charts, or did you have a combination, or did you have a combination of electronic backups? What was your sort of thinking with your
Okay,
navigation?
paper chart
Okay,
all the way along.
Tim, we had paper charts for the whole trip, and we had Navionics. We had iSailor on the iPad. We had backups for Navionics. We had, what's the other one, Emma? What's the?
Oh, no, a couple of things. We got told by the New Zealand people that iSailor is a really good app, and iSailor is another Navionics type app. But iSailor was very good because it gives long distances of route planning and shows anything that you are likely to bump into. So there was lots of hazards shown on their maps that you didn't
But
get
they're
on
on
Navionics.
Navionics. No, they're on Navionics.
No, they weren't, but they weren't on Navionics on the same way if you went out for a large distance.
No, yeah.
And the other thing that was fantastic in the islands was an app called Overtal, OVITAL, I think it is.
Which is photographs.
And it's actually Google Earth. It takes on Google Earth, but it puts you into Google Earth, and it has the Google Earth pictures, so it shows all of the coral. And as you're going into the coral areas, you're seeing
where you are,
the Google Earth pictures, so you can actually be guided through the coral from this Overtal. It was fantastic, but you have to download those things before you actually left anywhere. That you needed a lot of data.
So Tim, if I go back to your question, which is the pivotal one in the beginning, really, we had paper charts for the whole trip, and we left Melbourne and we plotted our course, and we changed watches, and we put all of that information on the paper charts for 2 days. And we then put the paper charts back into the cylinder that we had put them in when we first purchased them. And I think that they are in that cylinder still.
Yeah.
And if you are interested in purchasing them, we could probably do a good deal.
Or even borrowing.
But I think so. But I think what I'm hearing is you would want to be carrying them, but you obviously didn't need to use them in the end.
We wanted to carry them. Brian sailed to the Antarctic in the year 2000, and they were, what do you call it, knocked down?
Oh, knocked down.
Yeah, they were knocked down. So they lost all of their navigation equipment. So what did they have to do? Use paper charts.
Oh.
I think to have them is a very good thing. Hopefully you never have to really use them.
Yep, that's fine. But we also had computer backups then, and we had computer backups on the boat. So we are probably, Tim, we're pretty lazy about it all now. And really, we do rely on, we use the iPad and we use the Navionics, and that's really what we do. We rely on the technology. And I think if the Americans play around too much with all of the electronics, we'll end up sailing into something if we're not careful.
I think, Lisa,
And I'm going to say, if in doubt, don't go. Right. So if in doubt with the weather, don't go. That's enough to say, really. If it's, reef and reef often.
Oh dear.
But really, don't go if the weather's bad. That's what cruising's about. You're supposed to actually wait for the good weather.
I think, Lisa, you touched on a point where you got electronics and you zoom out because you're going a longer distance, and then you miss the hazard that's in the middle.
Yes, that's what
That's with a Volvo boat. That's what happened to them. It's happened to many a boat. You zoom out too far from the long distance and forget what's in the middle.
They only hit an island that was 60 miles wide. So
Yeah, because they were zoomed out to the Indian Ocean.
Yeah, no. Very, very easy to do. Very easy.
There's a rock between what's the strait, northeast coast of Tasmania and Melbourne. There's a rock in there. You just got to know it's there.
Yeah, that's right.
Right.
I think wasn't there a vessel from Mornington that found that rock?
That was the other side. I wasn't mentioning that one.
No, well, I can remember we were in the Tamar after a race down there, and we were up in Launceston on New Year's Eve, and there was a lot of people who were a bit shabby, and there was a boat from Melbourne that left at about 2 o'clock in the morning, and they were heading back, and they should have never been on their boat, and they hit an unmarked obstacle in the Tamar River
and sunk their boat on New Year's Eve,
which was same sort of problem.
heading back to Melbourne.
Yep.
All right.
So next time up, Brian and Lisa, you're going back to Fiji, or will you head north more to Vanuatu or what's the next plan?
We, in terms of proximity for Australia, we loved New Caledonia. We loved actually. We actually enjoyed New Caledonia incredibly. It was a lot of fun. The good thing about Noumea, it's got a lot of culture. And so that was nice. The cruising around the Isle of Pines and down that area is stunning. Over in Vanuatu was really good. You probably need to go to Vanuatu if you can, because that was the cheapest duty free that we've found anywhere in the world. So I don't know how much grog we purchased, but gin was I think it was $9 a bottle or something. So so we'd say Vanuatu is great cruising, New Caledonia is great cruising, Fiji you could go to for a year. Fiji was stunning. So really, for anybody who's able to do it, we just say, get out there and do it.
I've done something to our computer. I'm sorry.
You're right. Anyone else have any questions?
Have you lost us?
No, we got your voice.
Okay, fine.
Yeah.
That's all right.
You don't have to sail there either. We did the Cheats Way a few years ago and flew into Tonga.
Oh, we've done it a couple of times.
Yeah.
Yep. No, that's but I think to be able to any of these things really, an awful lot of the enjoyment is meeting local people and the cultures. And you find out so much. I mean, if you go through the Pacific, they've all had cyclones in recent years, and they rely on aid from New Zealand and Australia. And they rely on yachties to come up and do the things for them and put it all back together for them. They live a very simple life. And to be able to spend time with those people I think that's one of the things that is really memorable. I think Andrew and I had a conversation earlier today about diving into the cave in Tonga, and I think I did it a long time ago. Andrew did it, and there are just so many things you can do. So wherever you are, we've probably said enough.
And you've lost us, so we probably should sign off.
No. I'll try and get I'll try and get the picture up.
We're good. We're okay again.
Yeah, we got you, Andrew.
Yeah. So I haven't got it set up. Can you see that now?
We can see you. Can you see us?
See you again now.
Okay, well, if you can see us, we can't see
No.
you, but
But we
Anyone see
haven't
the
got
video or is that question?
we haven't got ability to see a whole lot of people.
No, there's just audio on it, Andrew.
We've got your desktop and or your.
Oh, we're back.
oh, okay.
We're back again.
And we can say that the wind in Beaumaris Bay has moderated, and it's forecast to drop to about 6 knots. And I think probably now we're heading in that direction. So we'll
there were lots of sheep in the paddock. Stu, thank you to you. As we were coming across, and they turned into baby lambs, and now there are no sheep in the paddock, thank God. And we are just rocking slightly. You can probably see us rocking backwards and forwards. But it's a beautiful night in Bow Bay, and oh my God, it's so lovely to be away from home and on anchor again.
Were you in Mornington Harbour this afternoon?
no.
Who's that?
Got
Hey?
Who's got Heidi's soundtrack going?
Who's got music going?
That's better.
That'll be bolts.
No, it wasn't me. It is one of my favourites, though. I have to own up.
I like your dial there, Bolts.
Oh, look, when I see a presentation like that and see some of these places, it doesn't really matter whether you've been to Europe or across the patch over there. Some of the scenery and the tails and the trips are fantastic. So, yeah, a little bit jealous the fact you're sitting on your boat that it was redlining earlier on. So, half your luck having a yacht. They did a great presentation and enjoyed seeing your travels over there. Well prepared and a great outcome for you. So, pity you had to cut the Tonga a bit short, but it happens.
Well, yep, it certainly is. But no, we should
But
say
it's really a beautiful place to go. Tonga's really worthwhile going and cruising. It's so many little islands, so many beautiful bays. It's just so safe. It's lovely.
When we were in Tonga, we went to the native village dinner, luau sort of thing, and we met some Americans. And this guy actually turned out to be another doctor, but he said years ago I was doing the Clipper Cup in Hawaii, and didn't have any ties or jobs at the time, and Ragamuffin needed a crew back to Sydney, so I jumped on. We blew out our main a few days out of Hawaii, a week out of Hawaii, and the nearest spot to fix it was the new cruising fleet in Tonga. So we found this place in Ragamuffin. I just had to come back one day. Not sure about cruising Vavavoo in Ragamuffin, but enjoying it.
no, fantastic. It was very nice of us to have the opportunity of reliving a number
it was
of
good
the
for us.
slides.
Thank you.
It was a lot of fun. So
And like Fiji, we've got so many photos of Fiji and down in the southern Lao in Falanga and all of those areas, but we didn't have much of Tonga. But it was good to talk about the preparation and the trip over and all that sort of stuff. So.
Absolutely. Has anyone else got any questions?
I'm just a bit disappointed that you could have actually said you were in Tonga right now rather than Beaumaris, and we would have someone just would have believed you.
Hang on, Beaumaris is good compared to Mornington.
No, that was great. Thanks.
I think I should walk around and vandalise their house. It's unguarded.
No, the gate's locked.
Oh, damn. We have our ways.
Thank you very much, Brian and Lisa. That was
Thank
fantastic.
you, guys.
Thanks, Drew.
My jealousy.
Thank you, guys.
Have a nice
Yep.
night, guys.
Thank you,
Been
Brian.
fantastic. Well done, guys.